You are standing in a workshop near Gordonville, Pennsylvania, and the lights are on, the drill press is humming, a chest freezer in the corner is keeping 40 pounds of venison frozen solid, and there is no electric meter on the wall. My name is Eli Yoder. The man who owns this shop is my neighbor Aaron. He is 73 years old, a quiet Amish carpenter, and he has run this entire operation for over 50 years without paying a single utility company 1 penny. Look at the wall behind him. No electric meter. Look outside. No wire running to a pole. Look in his mailbox. No bill at the end of the month. 50 years. No power bill. Ever. And before you tell me that is impossible, or that it only works because the Amish live some primitive life with candles and butter churns, let me stop you right there. Aaron has refrigeration. Aaron has lighting. Aaron has power tools that would make a modern contractor jealous. He has all of it. He figured it out decades ago. No $20,000 rooftop system, no 25-year loan the bank owns, no contract with the utility, $300 in parts, one quiet afternoon. That is what it took. And if you already own a home, even an older one, this applies directly to you. You do not need new construction. You do not need to rewire your house. I am going to walk you through exactly how this works, what every piece costs, and why you probably never heard about it, including a piece of federal law from 1978 that I will get to later. Stay with me to the end, because once you see how simple it is, you are going to be angry that nobody showed you 40 years ago. The first time I walked into Aaron's shop, I spent 10 minutes staring at the ceiling looking for wires. There were none. Just a single panel leaning against the south wall of the barn, a battery about the size of a beer cooler under a workbench, and a little box humming softly between them. That was the whole system. That was what was keeping the lights on and the freezer cold and the drill press spinning. 5 components, and I am going to name all 5 before this video is over and tell you what each one costs to the dollar. But first, I want you to understand the one idea that makes the whole thing work, because once you understand the idea, the parts are easy. Here is the idea. When you generate electricity right where you use it, you do not lose much of it. The big power grid that feeds most American homes does lose some energy, moving electricity hundreds of miles from the plant to your wall through transmission lines and transformers, but that loss is only part of the story. The bigger waste, the one that costs you real money, is everything bolted onto the grid between the power and you, the poles, the meters, the billing department, the rate increases, the fuel surcharges, the fees in fine print at the bottom of every statement. You are not just paying for electricity, you are paying for an enormous system whose main job, when you really look at it, is to keep you connected to it and paying every single month. The Amish did not need a physics degree to see this. Their whole culture is built on cutting out the middleman, doing the thing yourself, close to home, with your own hands. And the electric grid, when you really look at it, is the biggest middleman ever built. So a solar panel sitting 20 feet from the freezer it powers is not just cleaner, it is simpler. There is nobody in between. Nobody to bill you, nobody to shut you off, nobody to answer to. So back in the late 1970s, when small solar panels first started showing up in farm supply catalogs, a handful of Amish workshops in Lancaster County started experimenting. They were not trying to power a whole house. They were not trying to run air conditioning or electric ovens or televisions. They were trying to solve one problem at a time. They needed light over a workbench. They needed to keep a freezer cold. They needed to run a water pump out at the back pasture. And they figured out something the solar industry today does not put in its advertisements. You do not need one giant system that powers everything in your house. You need many small systems, each one dedicated to a single task. One panel, one battery, one job. They call it the direct task circuit, and it changes the way you think about the whole problem. Here is how the math works, and I want you to grab a pen because these numbers matter. These are rough prices, and they move around with the market, but they are close. A single 100-watt solar panel from any rural supply store or farm co-op costs about $75. A 100 amp-hour lithium iron phosphate battery, the same chemistry used in the most reliable backup systems in the world, costs about $150. A 30 amp charge controller, which is the little brain that keeps the battery from overcharging or draining too far, costs about $25. And a 400-watt pure sine wave inverter, which turns the battery's stored power into the kind of electricity that runs normal household appliances, costs about $40. Add it up. Right around $300, give or take, a few for wire and connectors, and a fuse or two, which you absolutely need and which I will come back to. $300 for a system that can run a chest freezer year-round, $300 for a system that has no monthly fee, no shut-off notice, and no contract with anyone. Now compare that to the rooftop solar, quote, your neighbor probably got last summer. $20,000, $30,000, sometimes $40,000 after they add the battery backup. A 25-year loan that, by the time you finish paying the interest, costs more than the electricity it was supposed to save. And here is the part most people do not find out until the lights go off. Many grid-tied rooftop systems are designed to shut themselves down automatically when the grid goes down. There is a real safety reason for it, so a panel cannot push power back into a line that a repair crew thinks is dead. But the result for you is that the very system you paid $30,000 for stops working in the exact moment you need it most. During the storm, during the outage, during the week, the whole street is dark. Aaron's system does the opposite. When the grid goes down, his freezer keeps humming, his lights stay on, his shop keeps running, because he was never connected to the grid in the first place. There is nothing to shut off. The sun comes up the next morning the same as it always does, and his battery fills back up, and he never even notices that the rest of the county spent the night in the dark. Now, let me show you what is actually going on inside one of these circuits, because once you see the flow, the whole thing stops being mysterious. The panel sits in the sun, facing south, tilted at roughly the angle of your latitude, which in Pennsylvania or Ohio is about 40 degrees. Whenever light hits it, the panel makes direct current electricity. That current flows through a pair of insulated wires into the charge controller. The charge controller is the gatekeeper, and it is the piece that keeps the whole system alive for years instead of weeks. It watches the battery constantly. It decides how much current to let through, how fast to charge, and exactly when to stop, because a battery that gets overcharged will swell, overheat, and die. Without that little controller doing its quiet job, you would ruin a battery in a matter of weeks. With it, the battery lasts as long as the chemistry allows. From the controller, the current flows into the battery, and the battery is where the real magic lives. The lithium iron phosphate battery, which the industry calls LiFePO4, is the part that changed everything about these systems. Before about 2015, off-grid setups used lead-acid batteries, the same basic chemistry as a car battery, and they were a constant headache. They wore out in 3 to 5 years. They weighed 60 pounds. They had to be kept upright and vented because they could leak acid on your floor and give off explosive gas if you charged them too hard. LiFePO4 batteries changed all of that. They last 15 to 20 years instead of 3 to 5. They weigh about a third as much. They do not leak, they do not off gas, and they can be run down low without being damaged, which a lead-acid battery hates. That one change in chemistry is what took the simple Amish circuit from a clever trick that needed constant babying into a system you can set up and mostly forget. From the battery, the current flows into the inverter, which turns the battery's direct current into the same 120-volt alternating current that comes out of any wall outlet in America. You plug your appliance into the inverter, and that is the whole system. Sun, panel, controller, battery, inverter, appliance. 5 components, 1 afternoon to assemble, about $300 all in. Now, I have to stop and say something important, because I am not going to hand you a tool without telling you how to hold it safely. The low voltage side of this system, the panel and the battery at 12 or 24 volts, is gentle to work with, but it is not a toy. A battery that size can push enormous current if you accidentally connect the wrong 2 things, enough to melt a wrench, scorch your hand, or start a fire in a wall. That is exactly why every one of these circuits needs proper fuses. An inline fuse on the battery, sized correctly, placed right where the manual tells you to put it, is the single cheapest and most important part of the whole build. Do not skip the fuses to save $4. The fuse is what stands between a small mistake and a house fire, and here is the part the easy internet videos gloss right over. The output side of that inverter, the 120 volt side, is real household electricity, and it will hurt you or kill you exactly like the outlets in your wall, because it is the same thing coming out. If you are only ever plugging an appliance into the inverter with its own normal cord, the way you would plug it into any wall outlet, you are fine. That is no more dangerous than what you already do every day. But the moment you start talking about wiring an inverter into the actual circuits of your house, you have crossed a line into work that can burn your house down or electrocute you, or worse, send power back out onto the grid and injure a lineman who thinks the line is dead. That work should be done by a licensed electrician with the proper permits and with the right transfer switch so backfeeding can never happen. I am not telling you that to scare you off. I am telling you so that you keep this in the safe lane. The Amish version I am describing keeps it simple on purpose. One appliance, one cord, one inverter. Keep it there, keep your fuses in, and you keep yourself and your family safe. So why have you never heard about any of this? Part of the answer is a piece of federal law from 1978 called the Public Utility Regulatory Policies Act. On paper, it was meant to encourage small renewable energy. In practice, the rules in the industry that grew up around them defined what a real solar installation was supposed to look like, and that picture was always the same: grid-tied, permitted, inspected, sold and installed by a licensed contractor, financed over 25 years. A simple $300 circuit running a single freezer did not fit any of those pictures, so it just never showed up in the advertisements or the glossy consumer guides. Not because it was illegal, but because there was no money in it for anyone but the homeowner. Now, I do want to be straight with you here, because your safety and your standing with the law matter to me more than a clean story. Rules about solar, permits, and what you can connect vary a lot from state to state and town to town, and the rules around anything that touches your home's main wiring or the grid are there for real safety reasons. A standalone circuit running one unplugged appliance off its own battery is a different animal from tying into your house panel. If you ever go beyond the simple version, check your local rules and talk to a licensed electrician. The Amish kept it simple partly because simple is safe and simple stays clear of all of that. Now, if you already own a house, and you are thinking this only applies to people building from scratch out in the country, stay with me, because this next part is specifically for you. Picture your kitchen right now. There is a refrigerator running constantly. There might be a chest freezer in the basement or the garage. There are lights you leave on in the evening. There is a well pump if you are on a well. These are the appliances that run up your bill more than anything else, and any one of them can be moved to a direct task circuit without rewiring your house. Here is how. You pick the appliance that bothers you most. For most folks I know, it is the chest freezer, because it runs 24 hours a day, every day of the year, quietly pulling power whether you opened it that day or not. It is one of the biggest single users of electricity in the average home, and it never stops. Instead of leaving it plugged into the wall, you set up a direct task circuit right beside it. One panel mounted on the south side of the garage or the south wall of the house, where it gets sun for most of the day. One battery on the floor next to the freezer, properly fused, sitting there quietly storing what the panel makes. One charge controller wired between the panel and the battery to manage the charging. One inverter wired to the battery to turn its power into normal household current. You unplug the freezer from the wall, you plug it into the inverter. That is the entire change. Nothing else in your house is touched. The freezer now runs on sunlight, day and night, because the battery stores enough during the daylight hours to carry it straight through the dark. A modern chest freezer uses around 200 kilowatt hours a year, and a single 100-watt panel in a place like Ohio or Pennsylvania makes more than that over a year, with margin to spare for a workshop light or a phone charger on the side. You did not call an electrician because you did not touch your house wiring. You did not pull a permit because you did not modify your house in any way. You just moved one cord from one outlet to another that happens to be powered by the sun. And next month, when the bill comes, it is measurably lower. The month after that, lower still, as you learn how the system behaves in different weather. By the end of the first year, the parts have paid for themselves, and that freezer, which used to cost you $60 to $120 a year, now costs you nothing at all. Then you do it again. The well pump, the workshop lights, the fan in the bedroom, one circuit at a time, the way the Amish did it. Aaron did not electrify his whole shop in one weekend. He added one circuit when he needed it, then another, over 50 years, none of them costing more than about $300. And there is a man worth knowing here named Sam Zook, who runs a business called Belmont Solar in Gordonville, Pennsylvania. Sam was one of the first to talk openly to outside reporters about how the Amish use solar. In an interview with the Christian Science Monitor back in 2008, he described the typical Amish setup as just a couple of panels and a battery. No grid connection, no app on your phone. He said sales of those simple systems to Amish families had jumped sharply in just that 1 year. And that was 2008, before lithium batteries, before the prices dropped to where they are now. Sam understood something the big companies would not admit. The panels were never the expensive part. Panel prices have fallen by more than 90% since the early 2000s. The expense was everything bolted around the panel. The contractors, the permits, the inspections, the grid tie hardware, the financing, the monitoring service, the sales commissions. The Amish skipped all of it, and that is why their systems cost a fraction of everyone else's. But there is one more piece of this that almost nobody outside certain Amish communities knows about, and it is the part I have been saving. In a small workshop near Mount Hope, Ohio, there is a man I will call Jonas, because he asked me not to use his name. Jonas has been building these circuits for his community for over 30 years, and about 15 years ago he started doing something the mainstream solar industry never talks about. He calls it a parallel chain. Here is what it is. Instead of one big system with one big battery, you build 5 or 6 small systems, each running its own appliance, each one a complete little circuit of its own. The freezer has its circuit, the well pump has its circuit, the shop lights have theirs. Then, and this is the clever part, you connect the batteries together through a single switch and a properly fused wire so that if one circuit's battery runs low, it can borrow a little charge from another circuit that happens to be full. The switch costs about $12. The wire and the fuses, another $10 or $20. So for around $30 in extra parts, your whole collection of little circuits gains the ability to share power with each other when they need to. Think about what that solves. The freezer circuit, which draws the most because it runs around the clock, can pull a little from the well pump circuit during a stretch of cloudy days when its own panel is not keeping up. Then when the sun comes back, everything tops off and the borrowing reverses on its own. You never have a single circuit fail in the middle of a gray week because the strong ones quietly hold up the weak one. Jonas has run his entire workshop on a 5-circuit parallel chain for 15 years. 15 years. Total maintenance in all that time, one charge controller that failed and got swapped out for a new $25 part. That is it. I asked him where he learned this, because I have read every off-grid book I can get my hands on, and I have never once seen this technique laid out anywhere. He told me it came from a handwritten manual that has circulated quietly in Amish and Old Order Mennonite workshops since the early 1980s. It was never copyrighted. It was never printed for sale. It was just photocopied and passed from shop to shop, hand to hand, one workshop to the next, because the men who wrote it wanted to share what they were learning without drawing attention from the outside world. Jonas showed me his copy, 43 pages, typed on an old machine with the wiring diagrams drawn in pencil by hand. And the parallel chain diagram in it is so simple that once you see it, you understand it in under a minute. You bring the positive terminal of each battery to a common bar, each one through its own fuse. You put a manual switch in the line, and you leave the switch open so each circuit runs on its own. When one runs low, you close the switch for a few hours, the batteries equalize, and you open it again. That is the whole secret. And the reason it never reached the mainstream is the same reason none of this did. You cannot sell a service contract on a $12 switch. You cannot finance a $30 upgrade. There is no contractor to send, no commission to earn, no monthly fee to collect. There is no money in it for anyone but the person who owns the house. But Aaron did not invent this. Jonas did not invent it either. The manual came from somewhere, and the trail runs back further than most people realize, to a man named Elmer Yoder outside Sugar Creek, Ohio, around 1923. As the story is told in those communities, Elmer was the son of a blacksmith, and he had spent a couple of years working at a Delco light plant before coming home to help his father. Delco Light was a real company founded by Charles Kettering in 1916 that sold small generator and battery systems to farms the grid had not yet reached. They sold hundreds of thousands of them across rural America before the grid caught up, and the standard installation was built around a bank of lead-acid cells in glass jars, a small gasoline engine to charge them, and a panel to run lights and a few small appliances. Elmer had wired these systems for English farmers and understood every single piece of them. But when he came back home to a community that did not want a gasoline engine rattling away in the yard, he did something the Delco engineers never intended. He kept the battery bank, the valuable part, the storage, and he threw away the engine. In its place, he connected the batteries to a windmill, to a hand-cranked dynamo, and to a little water wheel on the creek behind his father's shop. And he proved, 100 years ago, the one idea that everything else in this video is built on: the storage is the treasure. The power to fill it can come from anything that turns the wind, your own arm, a creek, or, today, the sun. That insight spread quietly from Elmer outward to his sons, to cousins in Holmes County and Lancaster County. Passed along the same way, the recipes and the building methods and everything else in these communities gets passed along by hand and by example. And when rural electrification finally reached almost every farm in America by the late 1940s, and the companies shut down their battery divisions because suddenly nobody wanted off-grid equipment anymore, the Amish did something shrewd. They went to the auctions and the estate sales and quietly bought up the surplus, the glass jar cells and the controllers and the wiring for pennies on the dollar, and they carried it home and kept the knowledge alive while the rest of the country forgot it ever existed. Now, whether every name and date in that story is exact or whether some of it has grown a little in the retelling the way old family stories do, I cannot promise you, because most of it was never written down anywhere. But the shape of it is true. You can still find lead-acid cells in some of those communities that have been kept in service for decades, topped off and cared for by hand, because that chemistry, treated with respect, does not really die. It just needs someone who knows how to look after it, and they always have. There is a man in Lancaster County, a harness maker in his late 60s, who has been off-grid his whole adult life. I asked him once what the hardest part of the system was to maintain. He thought for a long time, long enough that I figured he had not heard me. Then he said, the hardest part is remembering that it is not hard. He told me the English, meaning people like you and me, have been trained to believe that anything involving electricity is dangerous and complicated and needs a licensed professional. And he said that is absolutely true of the grid and of your house wiring, which runs at voltages that can kill you, and he was right to say it, because it is true. But the little 12-volt heart of his own system, he said, is gentle enough to learn by hand, one careful step at a time, with the fuses in place and the manual open on the bench. He told me that back in 1978, when he was a newly married young man, the utility company sent a man out to offer him a hookup, free installation, 2 years discounted. Just sign a 20-year contract? He showed the man his battery bank and his hand pump and said, no thank you. The man laughed and told him every Amish farm in the county would be on the grid within 10 years because the young people would not put up with the old ways. He is in his late 60s now. His farm is still off-grid, his sons are off-grid, his grandchildren are growing up off-grid, and the utility that sent that man has been bought and sold and merged more than once since then. That is the part that gets lost in all the talk of amp hours and wiring. The real story is not about electricity. It is about who owns your time. Every month, when you pay that bill, you are sending a piece of your labor to a company that did nothing to earn it, except be there when you flip the switch. Think about what a bill actually is. It is hours of your life, converted into money, converted into a payment, sent away, added up over a working life at the average American electric bill, and you are looking at well over $100,000 of your labor gone, and that is before you count the rate hikes that arrive every year, and the surcharges, and the fuel adjustments, and the line items in fine print at the bottom of the page that nobody ever reads. $100,000, sit with that number for a second. That is a down payment on a house. That is 4 years of college for a child or a grandchild. That is a retirement account. That is the difference between leaving the people you love something solid when you go and leaving them nothing at all. and it gets pulled out of you a little at a time, kilowatt by kilowatt, month by month, so slowly and so steadily that you stopped noticing it decades ago, because somewhere along the way you were taught that this was simply how the world worked, that electricity came from the wall, that the wall came from the company, that the company was inevitable, permanent, and beyond question. It is not. None of it is. Aaron knows it, Jonas knows it. That harness maker in Lancaster County has known it for 50 years, sitting on his porch with the lights on, owing nobody anything. And now you know it too. You did not lose anything by not knowing this until today. You just got it back. If you are the kind of person who believes that simple, real knowledge has been quietly pushed aside to protect somebody else's profit, then you already know what to do next. You start with one circuit, one appliance, one afternoon, $300, fuses included, done safely. You put one panel against the south wall, one battery on the floor, one appliance plugged into the inverter, and you watch what happens to your next bill. Now I want to hear from you. In the comments below, tell me which appliance in your house you are going to take off the grid first. Is it the chest freezer, the well pump, the workshop lights? Type it out and post it, because this audience does not comment as often as it should, and every person who says which appliance they are starting with helps the next person realize they are not alone in figuring this out. And if you found value in this, subscribe and stay with us, because there is a whole community here recovering the practical knowledge that was taken from us by the people who profited from our dependence. There are more of these techniques, more of these buried manuals, and I am working on getting access to the rest of the one Jonas showed me. The next video is about the heating system that has kept Amish homes warm through brutal Ohio winters without a propane tank, a cord of wood, or a utility bill, a design that came out of a Mennonite community in northern Indiana back in the 1930s. Until then, remember this. Aaron is in his workshop near Gordonville tonight, lights on, freezer humming, tools ready for the morning, and he has never paid an electric bill in 50 years. The only difference between you and him is $300 in parts, one quiet afternoon, and the decision to begin. The knowledge was never gone, it was just kept quiet by people who needed you to keep paying. Now you have it. Use it well, use it safely, and I will see you in the next one.